title of the book, because it's actually a trilogy. So the title for all the books is Forged by Fire, and then they've each got a subtitle as well. So this very first one is actually called The Crucible of Flame.
And then, have you got titles for the second or the third one yet?
Yes, I do. So it's the Crucible of Flame, the Hammer and the Anvil, and the Smelting Pot.
So how did you come up with these names, Donna?
So I think my main inspiration is actually taken from a story in the Bible, in Daniel chapter, I want to say 6. Can't remember. So yeah, I think Daniel chapter 6, and it's probably quite a well-known story of Daniel's 3 friends who refused to obey the king's order for everyone to bow down to his idol, and because they worship God, they refused, and the punishment was death by fire, by being thrown into a giant furnace. So the 3 men were thrown into the furnace. The actual guards who took them there also, that they died, and the king exclaimed that he could see 3 people in the furnace. So he could see 4 people in the furnace, and wanted to know who the 4th one was. And all 3 men walked out of the furnace completely unharmed, no singed clothes or anything like that. And for me, it just really reflects my life. Like a baptism of fire, let's say. And I'm still here, I survived by a miracle.
Exactly. So what was life like, growing up in your household?
I have a very untypical upbringing. So I grew up in a Christian household, and I didn't realise at the time that it was a very fundamental Christian home. So it included things like, being unable, we weren't allowed to read any kind of books that weren't pre-vetted and deemed as okay. We had no TV, we weren't allowed any access to any kind of media at all. So like news, magazines, radio, all of those things were not allowed to be part of our lives. And it made for a very small world. So we knew loads about the Bible. I could run off a bunch of Bible verses and tell you all the stories. But I'd have been lucky if I knew who the Prime Minister was at the time, or the different political parties, or what countries were at war, because I literally had no idea. So it was a very restrictive environment, all in the name of protecting us from the world. I kind of use air quotes there, because I think in reality it wasn't. I get that my parents thought that they were protecting us at the time, so I can kind of understand their thinking around it, but all it actually did was breed ignorance. And so kind of by the time I was a teenager, and things were going very, very wrong at home, I kind of entered this world that I knew nothing about. At 15 years old, I didn't really know that people lied. Which sounds ridiculous, but we've been raised in this environment where we were only ever around Christians at church or other family. And so the whole notion of kind of lies and bad people and people that didn't have your best interests was not really a thought in my head at that time. So it led me down a very, very dangerous path. So yeah, growing up, it was strange. I have memories of being really, really happy as a child, but with adult and fresh eyes on it, I think those memories may have been falsified.
What, Donna? I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think, and that was one of my questions actually. How? Because were you homeschooled, or did you actually go to school?
No, we weren't homeschooled. So we did get to go to school. So for me, I loved school because it was the only place where it wasn't church or God. So I was like, yay, people. But the reality was we were kind of raised in a rural town. At high school, me and my sister were the only black children at school. For the longest, I think there was 2 other Asian kids. There was like 900 children. So we already stuck out like a sore thumb. We couldn't really talk to anybody about, the kids' TV programmes, Grange Hill, everyone singing the latest pop songs that we'd never heard, talking about celebrities we knew nothing about. Probably my worst, I dreaded non-uniform day. So we kind of grew up with the only clothes we had was school uniform and our church Sunday best. And for those who aren't familiar with black people church, that means you dressed like you're going to a wedding. So non-uniform day would see me and my sister, dressed up like we're going to black people's wedding at school in the 80s when everybody else is wearing rah-rah skirts and neon socks and they've got the little adamant stripe face paint on and mullets. So it was cruel and it was mean, and I think I was oblivious to most of it because I was just excited to be out of the house.
And you mentioned before that, at the time, looking at your childhood with adult lenses right now, you realise it was a very abusive household, whereas at the time, you had these rose-tinted glasses in some respects where you thought you were happy. Yeah.
It wasn't until probably as recent as 4 or 5 years ago, and this was after a bout of counselling, because I've been in and out of counselling basically my entire adult life, and actually talking to my sister. And for years, when people had asked me about my childhood, I used to tell them that I had this idyllic childhood growing up in the countryside, skipping through fields, and all of these really lovely memories. And my sister turned around to me one day and she went, "Donna, that's not true." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "That is not true." And it really challenged me, and I think it was almost like a self-defense mechanism. And I know that's quite probably a common reaction for people who have experienced trauma, in that you kind of make up your own story because the truth is just too hard to swallow. And so it's only been recently that I've really had to challenge my memories and my emotions about my childhood. It was not an easy thing to do at all.
Because it's a lot of healing that you have to do internally.
Yeah.
Because even if you were looking at getting, because I know you, we'll touch on this a little bit later on. You've got a therapist and a counsellor. And I always say to people, to get counselling or any kind of therapy, they need to own up and be open to what they've gone through. Yeah.
The one thing I will say is one session of counselling or one period of counselling is rarely going to be enough. Like I said, I've been in and out of counsellors' offices since I was in my early 20s. Regular bouts of depression, and it's been a real struggle. And I know people who know me look at me and they're like, "Oh, but you're so strong, Dion," you're so strong, Donna, rather. And I don't actually feel that. I've had to work so hard to come to terms with the trauma and get to a place where I can talk about it, which is part and parcel of kind of writing these books, is that for the longest time I wasn't able to talk about it, and that was through a whole series of reasons why that couldn't happen. The abuse at home becoming sexual abuse at home, eventually it being part of my life. But then there was secondary abuse of victim blaming. So I spent 25 years with the whole of my family believing that I had told lies about other people in the family and was basically rejected and marked as the liar, the troubled one, for 20 odd years of my life. And so carrying that especially when it's not true, carrying the burden of somebody else's lies and somebody else's wickedness, and then me bearing the brunt of that. I don't really have words to describe it. It's given me a really strong sense of justice. It's given me a really strong sense of truth, and I will tolerate neither injustice or untruths in my life, because I know the damage it does to people.
And you know what, as well, I think, how do you, go from, being raised in this Christian home to still having faith in Christianity and having faith in God?
That is a really good question. I sometimes ask myself this question. It never occurred to me growing up that God wasn't real. And even in the middle of a really dysfunctional and abusive family environment, I still believed that God was real. And that was actually, a lot of that was down to my parents. And it's really difficult when you have to see the truth for what it is, and when the truth is both really horrible and really good, all mixed up in the same thing. So my parents made sure that I went to church, that I read the Bible, that I prayed, that we were always talking about the miracles of God and what he could do and all of those sorts of things. And it never left me. It never really left me. And despite their best efforts at making me turn away from God, I did definitely turn away from God, but it wasn't because I didn't think he was real. I always knew he was real. I was just like, screw you, mate. If you're going to make me go through all of this, and at that time, all I could see were Christians behaving like wicked people. And I was like, so you want me to be like them? Nah, mate. And so me and God were kind of at a standoff for, a decade or more, where I was just like, I'm not interested, not because I don't think you're real, but because if following you means being like them, I absolutely refuse. And it wasn't until I was in a really bad way with drug addiction, and God just made a way for me to kind of have a holiday, have a little break. And he spoke to me in no uncertain terms. And it wasn't to let me know that he was real or who he was, because I already knew that. He told me how my life could go, and that I had two choices, and I needed to choose one. And it was that I had a deep encounter with God that I could not explain in human terms, and I from that point on, I could not deny God, irrespective of what's happening in my life, and it has been nothing but a trauma. There's been a lot of trauma, a lot of good things, but a lot of trauma, and because I knew God, it didn't stop the trauma. It didn't stop those things from happening or continuing to happen, in fact. But it's like looking down at your foot, and you're just like, your foot might be broken or whatever, but it's like it's still a foot, it's still there. And that's like God is part of me, and I just can't deny him.
Oh, so Donna, I want to stay on the line because I want to play a track,
okay,
give you a breather, and then we're going to come back to you. So
awesome.
stay with us.
Thank you, Ngunan.
Ngunan Adamu, BBC Radio Merseyside. Thanks, Donna. We'll come back to you in a second. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good. Fabulous. We'll be back to you in about, how many minutes? About 3.5 minutes.
About 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Woke up this morning with a burning
I was going to say, they're just having a quick musical break because they're having a little dance there. Thanks to you guys who have joined in. Like, I really do feel the support. So thank you so much. Yeah, it's been interesting today. I wasn't sure what to expect. I kind of had a little pray before we started. I was like, God, this needs to be you. And I know that I can ramble. But yeah, it's been a really interesting time. I'm just really grateful that I've been able to transform something that's been so dark and negative and soul destroying into something that is positive and that will hopefully bless other people. So I will be doing some work alongside a domestic abuse charity who support women and men and children going through domestic abuse issues. So once this lovely interview is finished, I'll just really quickly just give you kind of like a little summary of what the plans are moving forwards, because what I really want to do is to be able to get my book into the hands of those who need to know that there's hope, to those who need to know that at your worst time in your life, the worst time in your family's life, there is still a way out, there is still hope and support, and more importantly that actually God is with you through all of those times. So yeah, fingers crossed that this is the start of something that is really beneficial and a real blessing to anybody who needs it, really. I mean, I remember feeling so alone. In fact, I was alone through a series of unfortunate events. But it doesn't have to stay that way. And sometimes now I'm just like, I actually really value that being alone, because I have some really amazing memories of being alone, but then having those really significant encounters with God. And my heart kind of longs after that more. It's like, people are great, family are great, support is great, organisations are amazing, but there is something quite unique, quite different, quite empowering from having a relationship with God. I think we're back.
On her incredible journey from being raised in an abusive household to now helping others and growing up and helping herself. So Donna, we talked about what life was like for you growing up.
Yeah.
Can we talk about your, how you got into drugs and how did you get into drugs?
Right. Okay. So this is a crazy story. So I was suffering with sexual abuse at home. I had attempted to get my mother to help, and all that did was land me in a whole bunch of trouble with everybody that I knew, who had been told that I was a liar, I was trying to destroy people, I was trying to destroy marriages and lives, and what a wicked person I was. So I went from this really closed environment where I essentially felt, pretty well loved and supported, and at least had people that I knew, to all of these people thinking and believing that I was in some way bad and that I had done something bad, and I was treated accordingly. And after that, I spent months, my parents wouldn't speak to me. I was just getting filthy looks. It was horrible, a horrible, wicked thing to do to a child. So I started spending more and more time out of the house, and I would just hang around with whoever. So where we lived, my mum was actually, and this is horrifying looking back, the manager of a housing unit for vulnerable teens. Go figure. And so I started hanging around with some of these vulnerable teens who were, from equally traumatic and disruptive backgrounds. And I just out one evening, I bumped into this guy who he just looked really friendly and smiley. So we smiled, he smiled, and I smiled back. We got chatting, and And that was it then. So he very quickly became my boyfriend. Now, I just need to give you this background. Of course, I'm 15 by this point. I have no clue about men, relationships, consent. Like, none of those things were ever part of my life. I ended up leaving the family home because for me I felt safer with this stranger than I did at home, which tells you everything really. So he became my boyfriend. So we were having sex quite soon, and just hanging around at his house, and it was like a shared house, and it was just a bit of a party house really. So that was my first introduction to drugs, and so there were people smoking weed and doing other bits and bobs. So when there's a big group of people and someone's like, "Oh, do you want some brown?" I was like, "All right." And so they passed this thing around, and I swear, honestly, probably it was about 18 months before I realised that what I'd been smoking was actually heroin. And I'd been smoking heroin out of pure ignorance because I'd never heard of drugs. I didn't know that drugs were bad for you. I didn't know that you could become addicted. I just didn't know. It was never a conversation we had at home. I think we'd had some conversations at school, but I think that kind of key information, that school tends to be they try and be quite impartial, I think, with the information that they give you. Like, this is what this is what it does, blah, blah, blah. But that key bit of information about the damage that drugs do to your body, to your emotions, to you psychologically, to your relationship, all of that was missing. So I just didn't know any of it at all. And by the time I kind of worked it out, I was, neck deep in, regular heroin and other substance abuse by that point. And I was everybody seemed to be having a great time. It didn't seem to be a problem. I was just about managing to keep my job, and so I was working. I think I went to college. Was kind of okay. But yeah, so it was out of complete ignorance, Ngunan, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that somebody can raise a child and not prepare them for the world.
I think, there's that part, there's so many factors there, so many points that actually a lot of schools hopefully now understand what children are going through. I think there's still a lot to be learned.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of interviews with adults who are trying to fight for young adults in social care and, vulnerable adults, young adults. But there's a lot that, the education system still needs to learn as well. Especially, it's baffling. Well, how did you kind of break the drug habit?
Ooh, okay. It was hard. So I would say by the time I came to wanting to break my drug habit, it was a good, I'm going to say 11, 12 years down the road by this point. So I've been using a really long time. I'd been in a 7-year relationship which ended because of drugs. I'd also been married and separated and had a child. And my marriage was an abusive marriage. So trying to break free was a real struggle. And I would say it was easily 2 years of trying and failing. So I went to different kind of like projects that were around the area at the time that had been recommended. There were different services available. I've had everything from kind of yoga and counselling to like journaling support. I've had acupuncture. I've even had like electrolysis treatment where they put electrodes on you and basically zap you. And I had absolutely tried everything. And I think one of the factors was I was still experiencing extreme domestic abuse from my husband. So even though we weren't together, he continually found ways to torture, attack, abuse, make my life a living hell for the longest time. So it was almost impossible to escape because we had a child together. So there wasn't a way of me excluding him from my life. And he was the kind of person that didn't take no for an answer. He was, pretty wealthy, had his own business, was white, middle-aged man. So when it comes to authority, the law, police, etc., the immediate assumption was whatever he said was right, and I didn't really have an opinion on anything. So it was very difficult trying to get out of that, because the powers that be, police, courts, all of those sorts of agencies, actually supported his abuse of me. It's the maddest thing.
Donna, I was going to say, we're going to get a time. We've got another interview, which is so That's fine. How can we, so when is your book, the first part of this book, when is it released?
Right, the first part of the book should be released in the end of February, so it will be available on Amazon in hard copy and as an ebook. So that will be the 28th of February this year. So I'm very excited. I have got a little sample copy that they sent to me. So it's just, it's all been written and signed off and everything. So now it's just Brilliant. At the publishers at the final stage.
And what's the name of the book again?
The book is called The Crucible of Flame, and it's part of the Forged by Fire trilogy.
Brilliant. Donna, we'll have to get you on again in February.
No problem.
Thank you so much. It's been an eye-opener, and can't wait to catch up with you soon.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Ngunan.
No worries. Bye.
Bye. Yay! How exciting. Thank you so much, you guys who have tuned in. I had no idea where that interview was going to go, but I'm really happy it kind of went where it did. And I know it's really only the tip of the iceberg in terms of elements of my life story. But I would just like to give a shout out to Teen Challenge. So I was asked, how did I actually break free of my drug addiction? So there is an organisation, it's in both America and in the UK, and probably all over the world at this point, called Teen Challenge. So I just want to say a big hi to any Teen Challenge people out there. So it is a Christian drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre. They take in anybody really, and they have a process whereby you're supported by a local church or a Christian community whilst you're in the centre. A lot of the people that end up there don't have a Christian background or have any kind of faith at all, and they're kind of thrown headlong into an environment where all of the support staff are Christians, where you're attending church services every day and really encouraging your spiritual health as well as your physical health. And for me, that's probably been one of the key differences from other addiction support services. They help to heal the whole person. So I would just like to say a massive thank you to Teen Challenge, particularly to Alicia Ward, who was my counsellor whilst I was there. She has no idea about this, but so my book, The Crucible of Flame, is actually dedicated to Alicia Ward. So there's a little thing at the beginning of the book, just an acknowledgement that actually Alicia was really instrumental in helping me to identify some key issues, to challenge my own beliefs about myself, and she listened, she didn't judge, she was absolutely amazing. And so the short time that I got to spend with her impacted me so much that, I'm 15, this is 15 years clean now, so we're talking over 15, nearly 16 years ago, and the impact of her love and compassion and just genuine wanting the best for me is still impacting my life today. So I just want to say thank you so much for you guys at Teen Challenge. It's been awesome, and I'm just so grateful that I got the opportunity to spend time with you guys and help set me on the right path. So yeah, I'm also going to be supporting a domestic abuse charity called The Crossing Point. So they're based in Liverpool. I've got a really good friend who works there, and what I would like to do is, once the book is published, a percentage of the profits from each book sold will be going directly to the Crossing Point charity. So they help men, women, children and families who are experiencing domestic abuse. They also go into schools and other education centres to teach young people how to identify the signs of domestic abuse, where to get help, who to turn to, and they deliver a whole range of training and support services. So it really is an honour to be able to use my own experiences for something that is positive within our community. So there'll be some more interviews with myself and the Crossing Point, and probably just identifying a few of the key issues in my book and relating them across to kind of what help is out there now. So I'm going to go now because this is much longer than I thought it would be. Thank you so much, guys. There will be some more videos coming over the next few weeks, and I'll obviously get the links out and everything when the book is published and available to buy online. So good night, bye bye.